The galaxy had a way of hiding its secrets in the most desolate corners. To most, the outer rim of the Orion cluster was a wasteland of rusting satellites, dead moons, and forgotten starports. But to Commander Elias Harrow, retired veteran of the United Earth Defense Forces, it was an opportunity. Elias had seen war at its most vicious. He had watched entire fleets dissolve under alien fire, witnessed comrades disintegrate in seconds from weapons he still couldn't name. He had survived things no training manual could prepare anyone for, and now, decades later, he was done following orders. The universe could keep its politics, its wars, and its conquests. He wanted one thing, a place of his own. It came in the form of an abandoned military base orbiting the grey, lifeless moon of Corinth 4, once a human outpost during the early expansion into deep space. It had been abandoned during the first wave of alien incursions. Official records called it obsolete, dangerous, and a liability. But Elias didn't care about paperwork. To him, the base was perfect, fortified, isolated, and equipped with relics of technology that still worked if one knew how to coax them. The purchase was quiet. No fanfare, no brokers. Elias signed off on the ownership with the simplicity of a man who had spent his life making life or death's decisions on instinct rather than protocol by the time he arrived. The base was little more than a skeleton of its former self. The hangars were empty except for rusting drones, and the corridors echoed with the memories of long-gone soldiers. Elias didn't flinch. He thrived in silence. He spent weeks restoring power grids, cleaning the main command deck, and repairing the old defense turrets. By the time he was finished, the base wasn't just habitable, it was deadly. Every corridor, every vent, every blind corner was mapped into Elias's memory. He had spent his life learning the art of killing in confined spaces. This was his domain now. He called it Harrow's. Mark, the name wasn't just vanity. He painted the insignia of his old battalion across the command deck and the entry gatesa, warning in the language of the galaxy's underworld, cross this line and you pay the price. Most ignored it, thinking it was nothing more than the eccentricity of a retired war hero. But rumors traveled faster than light. Within months, the word reached a group of alien hunters. They were known as the Zerenza, merciless race of interstellar bounty hunters, who specialized in capturing rare species and humans of combat potential. The Zirans were infamous in the Orion cluster. Fleets feared them, and governments paid their ransoms without question. When they heard about the abandoned base, they saw opportunity. A lone human veteran, isolated and perhaps too old to pose a threat. It promised to be an easy hunt. They arrived in the dead of the Corinthian night, their ships slinking like predators between the shadow of the moon and the black of space. They were confident, arrogantly so, because experience had taught them no human could outmatch their technology, their tactics, or their numbers. Elias didn't see their approach on conventional radar. He had intentionally kept the old base off the grid, off all frequency bands, so that any scanning alien ship would register only the natural noise of space. But he wasn't sleeping. Retired or not, a war veteran never let his senses dull. From his position on the observation deck, he watched the first Zyran ship slip into the gravity well. He smiled faintly. They always underestimate humans, he muttered to himself. When the Zirans docked, they thought the base was deserted. They didn't check for traps. They didn't scan for residual energy signatures. They were arrogant, precise, and confident. That was their first mistake. Elias had spent weeks setting traps, old magnetic mines, plasma nets, automated turret arrays, and, most importantly, sensor-triggered deterrents that were as unpredictable as the mind of a veteran. He had rigged the base to be lethal. Not to just defend it was to annihilate. The first group of Zerons entered through the airlock. Elias watched from the shadows, waiting, letting them wander down the main corridor. Their laughter echoed off the metallic walls, sharp and grating. They spoke in clicks and hums, their alien language harsh, yet musical, and then they crossed the first mark. A simple red line painted across the floor of the main corridor. Mark Elias had left intentionally. It was symbolic, almost ceremonial, but anyone who crossed it without permission triggered the base's first defensive protocol. The floor beneath them hissed. Panels slid open, releasing a burst of high-intensity plasma nets that wrapped around the hunters, immobilizing them instantly. Their screams, a combination of clicks and shrieks, filled the corridor. Elias didn't move. He only watched, a predator waiting as the secondary systems activated. The turrets along the walls rotated silently, aiming at the intruders with lethal precision. Plasma rounds ignited, and the corridor became a maelstrom of controlled destruction. The hunters tried to adapt, but the base's automated defense systems were guided by Elias's knowledge of tactics, anticipation of alien movement, and decades of combat instinct. By the time the dust settled, the first squad of Zerans was gone. The few who survived retreated, screaming back into the darkness of the hangar, only to encounter the next wave of traps, retractable ceilings, electrified floors, and automated drones that had been programmed with lethal efficiency. The base wasn't just a stronghold. It was a maze designed by a veteran who had survived entire wars. Every corridor funneled invaders toward zones of maximum lethality. Every vent could be a death trap. Every shadow could conceal the human who had once commanded entire fleets. The Zerans, confident in their own skill, didn't stop. They regrouped, attempting to flank the base through external airlocks, tunnels, and even the seemingly abandoned maintenance shafts. Every attempt ended the same. A few survived, none returned to tell the tale. Elias never once left his command center. He didn't need to. His traps were extensions of his mind. Every sensor reading, every movement, every anomaly was calculated. He didn't feel satisfaction. There was no pleasure in the kill. This was survival, pure and simple, executed in a way only a human could. Methodical, intelligent, and relentless. By the third night, the Zerans had realized the truth. They had underestimated humans. And Elias Harrow was no ordinary human. Word spread quickly through interstellar channels. Other mercenaries, bounty hunters, and even rogue alien factions whispered about Harrow's mark. No one dared challenge it. Ships would detour hundreds of light years to avoid it. Traders marked it on their maps as the human who owns death itself. But Elias wasn't done. He had more plans for the base, not for conquest, not for power, but for protection. He started converting old facilities into training grounds for young humans and friendly aliens, teaching them tactics, survival, and resilience. He trained them to defend themselves, to think strategically, and to respect the deadly elegance of the human mind. Harrow's mark became not just a fortress, but a bastion of hope for those who had been hunted, oppressed, or abandoned years later. When Elias Harrow's hair had turned silver and his steps were slower, the legend of the veteran who bought an abandoned base and made it untouchable was fully established. The galaxy spoke of him in hushed tones, respecting the power of a human who had survived what no one else could. A human who reminded the universe that strength was not always in numbers, technology, or species, but in the mind and will of one determined individual. And for those alien hunters, foolish enough to cross the markings of Harrow's mark, there was only silence, because when a human veteran drew a line, no one came back from crossing it. Asterisk.